Hello and welcome to Opt to Thrive, episode 50. Hair loss and menopause, why it happens and what you can do about it.
Welcome to Opt to Thrive, your go-to podcast for women's wellness in midlife, designed to educate, support and inspire you to live your very best life. And now your host, Dr. Karina Sims.
Hello. Well, it is a very, very, very unusual day out there today. It is muggy and thick and gray and warm. So not your typical Riverland summer day. And, to be honest, I've gotten a little bit slack with the watering. So it's actually really good that we've got some rain. And I don't understand how the weeds can still grow even though some of my plants are a little bit struggling. Not sure about my strawberries. I might lose them. I'm not sure. My husband says that they'll come back if I just put some water on them. We'll see. So here in my world, it's all been systems go. I gave another talk on the weekend, which was fantastic. This one, I put a little bit more kind of perimenopause, kind of visceral fat science into it. Fat behaving badly. Which is what happens to our fat cells when we get to this stage of life. They change. Their behavior changes. Don't know if you knew that. But anyway, that was in the talk. Loved it. I absolutely love giving those talks. They're so fun. And at the end, very engaged audience, had a lot of questions, which, I always love. And other news, very exciting. I have just started doing some consulting in the neighboring town in Barrie, if you're a local girl. I am now doing a half day a month at the Hamley House, which is the new medical clinic in Barrie. One of my dear friends, who was one of my colleagues on the obstetrics team for many years, has opened her own clinic along with a couple of her dear friends. So amazing all-girl team, although I'm sure that they'll have some boys soon. They're recruiting some more doctors to come and work there. So I don't think it's going to be all girls, but it's certainly an all-girl management team, which is fantastic. And they have really encouraged me to come along to, they're really looking out for their patients and really want to offer this service to their patients. So I've agreed to come and do a half day a month, which is really fun. If you haven't been to Hamley House, it's a beautiful location. It's an old restored house. I think it's had various functions, a restaurant and things over the years, but they've really kept a lot of the old features. They've, put some new carpets and air conditioning in there and some paint, but the old door fixtures and some of the light fixtures and some of the windows, beautiful. It's just got such a beautiful feel. But I'm not going anywhere. I love where I'm at in Renmark, but totally happy to go along and provide the service in a neighboring town, which has been fantastic. So enough of me flapping on. Let's get started with the topic today. Again, always interested in my own topics. But this is one that I felt like I probably needed a little bit of brush up on, a little bit of updating of my knowledge and just see if there's anything kind of new out there that I need to know about. So today we're talking about hair loss in women, because nearly half of us are going to be affected by hair loss during our lifetime. And it's certainly one of the things that can happen during the menopausal transition. But there are lots of reasons we can lose our hair. Sometimes it can even be the sign of another underlying health condition. So I think it's an important topic to talk about. Today, we're going to cover the common causes of hair loss in women, what menopause may or may not have to do with it, things to look out for and clue you into when you need to get it checked out. And we're going to talk about some things that can be done about it. So for a woman, losing our hair can be really distressing. I thought it's got to be distressing for men too, but maybe not as distressing as it is for us. I did find some numbers to back this up. One study reported that 52% of women losing their hair were very to extremely upset by their hair loss, compared to 28% of men in the study who were losing their hair. Another paper estimated that about 40% of women who have experienced hair loss also experience problems in their marriage associated with the hair loss. and 64% had difficulties in their career as well. So losing our hair can have a lot of impacts on our life, socially, professionally, all the way around. So again, all reasons this is so important to cover. So let's dive in. The first thing I want to say really is that hair loss can be a sign that there's something else going on with your health. Things like your thyroid misbehaving, various vitamin and nutritional deficiencies like iron deficiency, B12, and vitamin D deficiency, and even some more serious underlying infections or diseases. I want to start by giving you a list of some red flags, so if you're concerned about any of these things, please book an appointment with your GP, let them know what your concerns are so they can check it out for you. If the hair loss is rapid or it's coming out in clumps, if you're losing your eyebrow hair, or you've all of a sudden started getting severe acne or more body hair growth than you've ever had, if you've got severe fatigue, you're losing or gaining weight without doing anything differently, if you've got fevers or chills or new joint and muscle aches, all of those things need to be brought to your doctor's attention. Now today I want to focus on the two main causes of hair loss in women around this midlife period. I'm going to start by talking about these specifically, then I'm going to talk about menopause and hormones in particular and what they have to do with hair loss. These two main conditions can both be impacted by menopause, so I will kind of tie it all together after we're familiar with these two main conditions. So as I said previously, a good number of us are going to be affected by hair loss at some stage. By the age of 50, somewhere around 40% of us will have some hair loss. And by the time we're 80, less than 45% of us are still going to have a full head of hair. The first one we're going to talk about is the most common cause for hair loss in women, and it's called female pattern hair loss. Boys have their own pattern, the male pattern hair loss, where, as we know, they get that receding hairline that progresses to a bald patch on the top of the head. Women, fortunately, don't tend to lose all of their hair like men do, and it's really uncommon for women also to have a male pattern hair loss. And if they do, it usually means that they have too many androgens floating around, so more male type hormones like testosterone. Though we know, because we've talked about it before, testosterone isn't just a male hormone. We've got testosterone too, just not as much as them. Now, in female pattern hair loss, the pattern starts with a thinning of the hair on top of the head. If you part your hair down the middle, you would notice that the thinning progresses so that eventually the hair of the part closest to your forehead has a wider area of thinning than the hair on the part more towards the crown of your head. In the medical textbooks, this is described as a Christmas tree pattern. So one end, towards the crown of your head, has a smaller width of thinning than the area closer to your forehead, which has a wider area. So female pattern hair loss has a strong genetic predisposition, but there are lots of genes that contribute, and they can come from either your mom's or your dad's side. And even though we know there's a genetic link, we don't yet have any reliable genetic testing. What we do know, though, is that about half of women with female pattern hair loss will have a first-degree male relative, so a brother or father, who over the age of 30 was affected by hair loss. And about 20% of women with female pattern hair loss will have a female first-degree relative, so mom or sister, who was affected by female pattern hair loss after they were 30 years old. This type of hair loss can affect women in any age group, but it does occur more commonly after menopause. The hair loss isn't constant, and it usually kind of comes and goes in waves. There can be times when the hair loss is more rapid over, say, like a 3 to 6 month period, and then maybe you have another 6, 12, 18 months where it's more stable. If we don't treat it, it tends to progress in severity over the next few decades of life. Now, unfortunately, there isn't a cure for female pattern hair loss. The aim is to slow it down or stop the progression rather than to promote hair regrowth, though some women do get regrowth with treatment. Results are variable, and it's impossible to know who's going to respond to the treatment. The first-line treatment for female pattern hair loss is something called minoxidil. It comes in a solution or a foam, and it can be bought over the counter at the chemist. It needs to be applied to the scalp every day, and it's effective in stopping the hair loss and can help with some regrowth in about 60% of the women who use it. It can cause some scalp irritation in some people, and if you stop the treatment, it's important to know that you usually start to notice a regression within 6 months. So the hair starts to fall out again to the level that would have occurred if you had never had treatment to start with. Minoxidil in topical form, so the foam or the solution, or in a tablet form, can also be combined with another tablet that targets androgens. These are prescription only, so they need to be prescribed by your doctor. Your GP may want to refer you to a dermatologist before prescribing this combination, but it's definitely worth having the conversation. Now, the second most common cause of hair loss in women is something called telogen effluvium. Before diving into this one, it's going to help and be so much more interesting to have a little background knowledge in the way that our hair grows. So everyone's born with a fixed number of hair follicles on the scalp. They produce hairs throughout our life. Our hair grows from the base of the follicle at a rate of about 1 centimeter a month. Our hair goes through different phases of growth. There's an actual growth phase, which is variable. We can all be a little different, so it can last anywhere. I've read very different reports of this, but what I read was anywhere between 2 and 8 years. So some years, I think on average 3 or 4 years is probably the main consensus. And eventually the hair will leave the growth phase and it will go into a resting phase, which lasts for a few months or so, and then the hair falls out. At any one time, about 85% of our hair, so most of our hair, is in the growth phase, which is called the anagen phase. I am only bringing this up because I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later, so you don't have to remember that. Most of the other 15% of our hair is in the resting phase, which is called the telogen phase. While the hair's resting, a new hair grows underneath it and eventually pushes out the old hair. So as I said, the resting phase is called the telogen phase, and telogen effluvium is the second most common cause of hair loss in women. This condition, telogen effluvium, is triggered when we have some type of shock to our system. It could be anything from giving birth to losing weight, a drastic change in diet, some type of psychological distress, an operation or an illness, or even an accident. This shock can send up to 70% of the hairs that were growing along happily in the growth phase into the resting phase. And then as the other little new hairs start to grow underneath over about 2 to 4 months, the resting hairs get pushed out by the new hairs. So this shock to our system essentially shoves a bunch of our hair that was growing along happily prematurely into the resting phase, which then means it's going to fall out earlier than it would have if it hadn't been shocked. This type of hair loss happens all over the head, so not like just in one spot, and not like the female pattern hair loss just over the top of the head around the part of our hair. Another thing that can happen that may be another clue that this is telogen effluvium is that because our hair and nails are under the same growth influences, our nails may give us a clue. There's something called bowlines. A bowline is a groove across the fingernail, like a linear indentation. And if you do get the bowlines as well, the time of the shock can be estimated from the fact that a fingernail takes 5 months to grow from the base of the nail to the edge of your fingertip. So if the groove in the nail is halfway down the nail, then we can assume the shock must have been about 2.5 months ago. There you go. So interesting. But not everybody gets bowlines. It's just one thing that we can look for. Now, as I said, 70% of all the hairs that were in the growth phase can be affected. And I said that about 85% of all our hair at any one time is in the growth phase. So that can be a big amount of hair to lose. But the good news is that this is most often temporary. And it usually resolves over about 6 to 9 months once that acute stressor or shock has gone. But if stressors keep getting repeated and this process keeps happening, it can evolve into female pattern hair loss. Telogen effluvium can also become chronic, and so female pattern hair loss and telogen effluvium can be confused. But it is important to work out which one it is, though they can also overlap, which can make it a bit more confusing, but the treatments are different, so knowing what we're treating is important. Treating telogen effluvium means treating the underlying cause. If the cause was some kind of acute insult, like an accident or an operation, then great. That is hopefully a one-off. But if the issue is something like thyroid dysfunction or iron or vitamin deficiency, then those things need to be identified and treated. Telogen effluvium can also be caused by a long list of medications, everything from blood thinners to some antidepressants and some blood pressure medications. So thinking back and identifying starting a new medication or even just increasing the dose may help you find the culprit. Now, speaking of medications and hair growth, it may be interesting for some of you to know the mechanism behind the hair loss with chemotherapy. Remember that growth phase, the anagen phase? Well, some chemotherapies can affect hair in the anagen phase, and instead of sending it prematurely into the resting phase, it just falls out directly from the anagen phase. It's called anagen effluvium. With chemotherapy, the hair loss may become obvious within days to weeks of starting treatment, unlike telogen effluvium, where it takes a couple of months to start showing up. Other things can also cause anagen effluvium too, like autoimmune diseases and infections like boils, abscess, or fungal infections, and some other toxins. Anagen effluvium causes an abrupt shedding of much of or all of the hair of the scalp, and often from the entire body, including eyebrows, eyelashes, and body hair. The treatment, again, depends on what's causing it. After chemotherapy, for instance, hair often regrows within 3 to 6 months after stopping the chemo. The hair nearly always grows back normally, but sometimes those with straight hair can end up with curly hair when it regrows, and hair color might also change. For telogen effluvium, it's also recommended that the hair be handled gently with no over-vigorous combing or brushing or even scalp massage. Make sure you're eating a good nutritious diet with plenty of protein, fruit, and vegetables, because that could help too. Now, let's put it all together with hormones. I have kind of specifically left the hormones out so far so I can bring it all together at once. So our declining estrogen levels during menopause do directly impact our hair follicles because, surprise, surprise, like lots of other things in our body, our hair follicles are estrogen sensitive. Estrogen helps keep more hairs in the growth phase and may help hair appear thicker and fuller. As estrogen levels fall around menopause, many women notice that their hair looks and feels finer and drier, maybe a bit more brittle and breaking more easily, and maybe doesn't grow as long as it used to. Our changes in hormones are also linked to a higher risk of both female pattern hair loss and telogen effluvium. We often see more hair shedding with a larger number of hairs in the resting stage of the growth cycle than before. This can sometimes show up as ongoing excessive shedding or chronic telogen effluvium, and this can even overlap with female pattern hair loss. So both at the same time. So if hormones are part of the problem, then is replacing them the solution? Menopause hormone treatment can have an influence on hair in a few different ways. By increasing estrogen levels, we might help some of those hairs stay in the growth phase for longer. By improving the menopause symptoms alone, like sleep, which then can improve stress levels and overall well-being, those things can indirectly help us have healthier hair. And some treatment types I'll talk about in a second can help by affecting how the body processes androgens, which can help certain patterns of thinning. But menopause hormone treatment, unfortunately, isn't going to override strong genetic tendencies like those found in female pattern hair loss, or completely stop the age-related hair changes that we're all going to go through. So it can be something to consider. It may help in some women, but it's not a guaranteed fix, and it's certainly not an indication on its own to start hormone treatment just for hair. It really needs to be carefully tailored to your overall health and your symptoms, not just your hair health. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to touch on here is the question I do get from time to time, and that is does progesterone cause hair loss? Now, there's a bit of nuance here and a few terms to understand before I can really answer this question. So progesterone is a hormone produced mainly by the ovaries. Micronized progesterone is used for hormone therapy. It comes from a plant source and then is chemically converted in the lab into progesterone that is structurally identical to the naturally occurring progesterone hormone produced by the ovaries. It comes in a capsule form, and that capsule is the only body identical formulation we have in terms of progesterone. This type of progesterone is considered to have a neutral or maybe even protective effect on hair health in menopausal women. But we also need to talk about progestins. But before we can talk about progestins, we need to talk about progestogens. Trust me, stay with me, it's all going to make sense in a minute. A progestogen is what we call any compound, either natural or synthetic, that can bind to and activate progesterone receptors. So progesterone itself can do that, so it's a natural progestogen, and then we have synthetic progestogens, so compounds that are synthesized to be able to bind to and activate progesterone receptors. It can be confusing because generally speaking, people use the word progesterone, myself often included, to refer to the other component in menopause hormone treatment as a generic term, right? So the other part of hormone treatment other than the estrogen. But technically, there is micronized progesterone, the capsule, and then everything else is what we call a synthetic progestogen or progestin. I make the distinction because, as I said, the capsule is considered to have a neutral or maybe even protective effect on hair health in menopausal women. But some of the synthetic progestogens can have an effect on hair thinning. The combined patches here in Australia, as well as the Mirena, the intrauterine device, generally have the type of progestin that can affect hair. The risks are pretty low. For the Mirena, it appears to be less than 1% in all the resources that I saw. For the other progestins, it looks to be slightly higher than the Mirena, but I couldn't find any firm numbers. I would say that if you're already experiencing hair thinning, or there's a strong family history of female pattern hair loss or in male pattern hair loss in first degree relatives, as we talked about before, then I'd probably avoid the progestins altogether and just stick to the progesterone capsules with your estrogen. So there you go. I hope you've gotten something out of this. I certainly was ready for an update, as I said, and a review of my knowledge. So as always, I found it really interesting. If you have a topic that you'd like to see me cover in the future, please send me a message and let me know. I absolutely love hearing from you guys. I've said before, I am really excited for the next month or so. I've got several guests lined up. That's really exciting. It's probably going to be a bit of fun for you guys, maybe a nice change for you not listening to just me. I hope that you are all enjoying your summer or your winter if you're on the other side of the planet. I want to send a big shout out to everyone who's taken the time to give me a review or a rating. Really lovely. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't done it yet, it's pretty easy. Recently, in one of my group coaching sessions, one of the girls was asking me, how do I rate the podcast? I don't know how to do it. So I walked her through how to rate it. And then we've had this funny discussion. She said, you probably should tell people on the podcast. There's probably a lot of women like me who don't know how to do this. So I thought, okay, I will. So if you open up the podcast, let's say that you're in Apple Podcasts, you'd open it up and then you would scroll down. So you would open the Opt to Thrive page and then you'd scroll down to the bottom. And at the bottom, there's a section that says ratings and reviews. And there's 5 little purple stars. And then you just tap on however many stars you want to give me. And then if you want to actually say something to me, then you scroll down a little bit further and there'll be some writing that says write a review. Right after somebody has already, given a review there. So there's the 5 stars. There's someone who's given a review. And then just below that, it says write a review in purple. And you just push on that. And that will allow you to write the review. On Spotify, if you go to the podcast, you have to scroll up to the top. There's 3 little dots. You push on the dots just below where it says, has the little picture and it says Opt to Thrive for Midlife Women. The 3 little dots, you push on those, and then it has a little star there. The third one down, it says share, remove from your library. Don't remove me from your library. And then there's a star and it says rate the podcast. And if you push on that, it'll pull it up and then you can just push however many stars you want to give. So hopefully for those of you who haven't done it yet because you weren't sure how to do it, hopefully that's walked you through it. All right, guys, that's what I've got for you today. I hope you have an amazing week. And until then, I hope you opt to thrive. Hey, before you go, if you're a midlife woman who wants to feel better in your body, whether that means improving your health, building strength and confidence, or working towards weight change in a kinder, more sustainable way, I have created something especially for you to support you. It's called the Midlife Health and Body Reset Kickstart Guide, and it's a free 7-day foundations guide to help you understand what's going on in your body in midlife and what actually makes a difference from here. You can download it using the link in the show notes. And if you're ready to take things even a step further and you'd like personalized support, you're welcome to join me inside the Midlife Reset. It's my coaching program for midlife women who want clarity, accountability, and compassionate guidance as they build strength, improve their health, and create real lasting change. I'm now running monthly intake cycles, which means there's a supported onboarding start date each month, so you don't have to wait for a big launch and you can begin when the timing feels right for you with guidance from day one. You'll find a link in the show notes to get you all the details. And if you're not sure whether it's the right fit, you're always welcome to reach out and ask me any questions. We can even book a little discovery call where we find out if we're a good fit and if it's the right program for you. Just send me a message. Thanks so much for listening.
The Opt to Thrive podcast is designed for information purposes only and is not engaged in the giving of medical advice. The information provided on the podcast should not be used for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease. In no way should the information provided by Opt to Thrive be considered medical advice, and at all times the advice of a medical professional should supersede recommendations from Opt to Thrive. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, you should consult your healthcare provider. The views expressed in this podcast are purely that of Dr. Sims and do not in any way reflect those of the institutions she contracts her medical services to.
Thank you for listening to Opt to Thrive. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate and share the podcast. You can visit our website at opttothrive.com and leave a comment for any subjects you would like to hear more about.